Okay, thanks for tuning in. Want to talk briefly about some of the sequelae that can come as a result of having PTSD or complex PTSD. Thanks for tuning in. So I mentioned in an earlier video you can have small little genetic changes that occur, not necessarily to the genes themselves, the DNA itself, but things that are adjacent, enzymes that are nearby that are going to turn things on and off, or just a single nucleotide modification that can actually have substantial effects in the body. It's my suspicion that if these things can be turned on, that they can also probably be turned off. So that is the good news. I want to talk about one in particular that I suspect is fairly common. Because there are lots of, I've observed a lot of crossover PTSD and immune modulatory type stuff that happens. It's my suspicion. Well, there's actually research that does demonstrate that this is definitely something that happens, and you notice PTSD itself is inflammatory in nature, and so you have lots of inflammatory markers that increase with PTSD. For example, in combat veterans, they've done studies where they show a lot of the interleukins, as they're referred to, or chemokines, cytokines that are all associated with inflammation go up in PTSD. So knowing that, there are things we can do about it. But first, let me tell you about one of these changes that happens. The change is called, it's not really important the name of it, but I'll tell you anyways, TRAF1. So TNF alpha associated factor 1. This can get methylated, as we call it, meaning something parks on it and changes the way it functions in the body. It, in turn, has effects on NFK beta, which is another kind of immune gateway linchpin type thing. TNF alpha itself is one of these little inflammatory marker things that turns on stuff downstream. It's like a gateway or a linchpin to the rest of the immune system. And so if you have changes that happen there, what you'll notice would be somebody with this particular SNP is going to be more susceptible to viruses, in particular Epstein-Barr virus, which causes mononucleosis, herpes zoster, which causes basically a recurrence of chickenpox or shingles, and that obviously not everybody knows this, but it's strongly correlated with stress. And so high levels of stress will trigger that. Also, HIV, which is a retrovirus in particular, and influenza, which is another virus. The other thing we see is there's an increased risk of certain kinds of cancers if you have this particular change, because of course the immune system is going to also be hunting down little changes that are going to make one more susceptible to cancer. And in fact, your immune system is always finding cancer cells and basically taking them out, causing apoptosis in them, commit cell suicide. And if it stops doing that, then you're at an increased risk of developing cancer. And so with this particular change, you also have another SNP that kind of often occurs with it. They can be comorbid, as we say. The second one is called SLC6A4. What it ends up increasing the risk of or causing more of would be depression, any kind of depression, postpartum depression, major depression, seasonal affective disorder, like you name the kinds of depressions that occur. And we know really as a result of PTSD in general, you're at an increased risk of depression. So that, along with other neurological type stuff like Alzheimer's disease, which is You can have dementia type things going on as a result of the SLC6A4. Like I said, they kind of go together. Not always, but can often occur together. So if you see that kind of constellation of, say, and this is really common when it comes to PTSD. Someone's more susceptible to viruses, also more susceptible to being depressed. You get both together, you go, oh, maybe these are some changes that I am experiencing. And like I said, if they can be turned on, they can likely be turned off. That's my suspicion anyways. And probably the best way to do that would be dietary changes. So, what can we do with this information? Well, number one, use it as fuel to motivate yourself to make some dramatic changes. I'm not talking, let me just change this so that I don't get this virus this week, but long term, change what you're eating. The gist of it is stop eating crap and start eating real foods, meaning focus on plants, eat a lot of things with antioxidants in them, eat things that are going to help on the antimicrobial front and on the oxidative stress front. For example, vitamin A rich foods, kale, spinach, your dark green leafies, winter squash, sweet potatoes. Consume large amounts of those. Secondly, vitamin C rich foods. That's pretty easy. Citrus, your bell peppers, especially the colored bell peppers, kiwis, these are all huge sources of vitamin C. Did I say kiwi? Yeah, kiwi. Lots of your fruits. 3, antimicrobial kinds of foods. Things like garlic, onions, mushrooms, lots of your spices, using them liberally in your diet. Not just going to make you a better chef in the kitchen where you can impress that woman with your cooking skill, but also going to help you fight off the virus that you got exposed to from your coworker who was so kind to share it with you by coughing on you. So these are some things you can do. Cutting out anti-inflammatory foods is also going to help. I know it's hard to hear, but meat in general and dairy tend to be pretty highly inflammatory. They go down a pathway to arachidonic acid, which is a pro-inflammatory marker in the body, which ends up, if you're already in an inflammatory state because you have PTSD, and in addition, you're trying to fight off stuff, so you've got even more inflammation going on because your body is trying to harness a response, you don't need foods that are going to amp up the inflammation. You need foods that are going to decrease, that are non-inflammatory in nature. Again, plants tend to be anti-inflammatory in nature. Watching the fat content. There's certain kinds of fats that increase inflammation and some that decrease it. Omega-3s tend to decrease inflammation in the body. They are anti-inflammatory in nature. Omega-6s, you guessed it, found they're pretty high amounts of O6. O6 to O3 ratio is high in a lot of our agri-industry meat in particular. So decreasing the meat intake is going to decrease the O6. The average American standard diet tends to get a ratio between O6 and O3 anywhere from 20 to 30 to 1. That's O6 to O3. The ideal ratio is closer to 4 to 1. This is why we supplement in the naturopathic world with omega-3s. It helps change the ratio. The enzymes involved in converting these things down the fat pathway is the same enzyme all the way across. And so if you tie it up with a lot of O6 in the diet, you end up not making O3. Okay, I hope this is helpful. Thanks for tuning in. Adios.